Hey, what's up, guys? I'm CoryV from MTG Epic Cinemas, and today I will show you the Grixis mid-range deck that was featured on our first show of the main phase. On your screen is the full list that was sneak peeked on the show, and in this video I will go in depth on how this deck works and the concept behind it. Alright, so we're going to start this deck today off with the creature base. First we're going to have 4 Falconwrath Aristocrat, 4 Knight of Infamy, 1 Olivia Voldaren, 4 Snapcaster Mage, 3 Thundermaw Hellkites, and 4 Vampire Nighthawks. Now, Falconwrath Aristocrats and Thundermaw Hellkites are going to be your finishers. They're the ones that are going to close the games out for you. Knight of Infamy is there to give you an advantage against the white decks, specifically the aggro decks. He really shines in those matchups for the fact of that protection from white, but also his Exalted trigger does create different combat situations and scenarios that make it difficult for other players to play with. The one of Olivia Voldaren, she's a utility card. She can be a finisher, but the real reason she's in here is for the specific matchup of the mid-range decks. Specifically the ones with Thragtusk. Now, since we can't play with our own Thragtusks, we have to be able to counteract it. And since we're not actually using counter spells, and besides they're not any good anyway, we have to deal with it with Olivia. And I'm actually very fine with this because I would rather take the creatures and then beat them with it than worried about countering them. Granted, I realize that there's a lot going on when you're doing that, but it's a risk that you have to take, and she's very good. She also acts as a pseudo removal spell against aggro decks, but she really doesn't shine in that matchup, so I could see her being boarded out. Now moving into the 4 Snapcaster Mage. Snapcaster Mage is the whole reason why I built this deck. I'll be blatant honest. I wanted to use Snapcaster Mage with all of the spells that Grixis offers. Things like Dreadbore, Pillar of Flame, Searing Spear, Ultimate Price, all those spells are very good with Snapcaster Mage. And especially when you have an abundance of them against certain matchups, it kind of just tilts it back into your favor. Thundermaw Hellkite. Now, I know we already talked about this one earlier being a finisher, but he's actually more than a finisher. Thundermaw Hellkite actually is a pretty good answer against Lingering Souls. I do find that Lingering Souls might be a little bit of a problem for this deck, but if you play your cards right, you should be able to play around it, especially if you draw a Thunderball and you land it. Once that happens, the game is pretty much over with. 4 Vampire Nighthawks, the last creature on the list. Since we can't play Messenger in this deck because our mana base will not be able to afford it, we have to settle with Vampire Nighthawk. Well, I have to say that I'm actually very impressed with this guy. I've been playing with this deck for a few days now, and he has really shined as probably one of the best creatures in the deck. The fact that he has 2 power kills all the zombies. The Death Touch, he 1-for-1s all the bigger threats, which is what Grixis does already anyway, and the life gain, obviously. The life gain is just awesome. And the butt on the creature itself. The 3 power, or the 3 toughness, I should say. Moving on from the Vampire Nighthawk, though, we're going to have to go into the spells. We're going to start off with the kill spells themselves. So we have 2 Dreadbore, 2 Ultimate Price, and 1 Sever the Bloodline. Dreadbore is the best removal spell currently in the format right now as a spot removal. Unfortunately, what Ultimate Price has on it is it has an instant speed. Dreadbore is sorcery speed, which makes it a little worse. But it also can affect Planeswalkers. Dreadbore is like the best answer for this deck against Planeswalkers. This deck used to kind of be put in the dirt, the decks that ran Planeswalkers, I should say. And it was just difficult for them to interact with those guys. But now that they have a sufficient answer against Planeswalkers, the deck becomes a lot better. Ultimate Price. Now, the thing is with Ultimate Price is people actually underrate it. If you look at Standard right now, Ultimate Price would be very good. Now, yes, there are some creatures that are multicolored, and they're very good. Some of those creatures being Falconwrath Aristocrat, Olivia Voldaren, Centaur Healer, Huntmaster of Fells, but those are usually the 4 that pop up every single time. There's really no more other than that. I mean, you couldn't hit Geist of St. Traft anyway with it, so why are people worried about it? But guess what it does hit? Hasty creatures. It does hit Thundermaw Hellkite. It does hit Restoration Angel. It does hit Thragtusk's front, or the Beast token even. It hits all the black zombies, even though it's not really something you want to do, but desperate times calls for desperate measures. Ultimate price actually is very good, and I'm pretty sure that the 2 amount of it in there is probably the correct number. Now we're going to move to the burn spells. We have 3 Pillar of Flame in the deck, and 3 Searing Spear. Pillar of Flame is a no-brainer. You want that against the zombie matchup, and the fact that Snapcaster Mage technically means that you have 7 potential copies of this card in the deck makes it very good. Searing Spear, on the other hand, Searing Spear, obviously isn't Lightning Bolt, but it's good enough. It's not as good as Incinerate, but Searing Spear is good enough. And like I said, it does create combat math with Snapcaster Mage, and people do have to play around it. The Sever the Bloodline that I forgot to mention, the Sever the Bloodline is in there for Lingering Souls tokens. It's not bad against zombies, but it isn't great. It does exile them. It does have flashback itself, so you don't really need to Snapcaster flash it. It's just a decent all-around spell. Unfortunately, it is a sorcery speed, but for now, Sever will be pretty good. The Tragic Slip in the deck. The Tragic Slip in this deck, there's 1 in the main deck and 1 in the sideboard, but you want Tragic Slip against opposing Falkenrath Aristocrats. It's really difficult to deal with that creature. That's why we're running it ourselves. It's just very difficult to deal with it. Tragic Slip does get around it, so you do want to have at least 2 of those copies somewhere in the 75. The 2 Izzet Charms in the deck. Izzet Charm, I'm not too sure on this one, actually, now that I've built it and played it, but it is pretty good right now. I'm fine with it just being a little removal spell that can potentially counter something, especially if you do get it and you're able to cast it when they try to cast the Lingering Souls the first time. You definitely want to counter that every time. The first Lingering Souls is usually an issue, so it's good to have at least something against it. And he also acts as a card dump. If you're drawing into lands too much, you can always just, Faithless Looting them back away, basically. Izzet Charm, I think, will be fine. I could see it going down to a 1 of, but for now it's going to stick as a 2 of. It did play out pretty well, so we're just going to keep it at that. Rakdos Keyrune. The reason why I chose Rakdos Keyrune, so technically if you want to consider it, there's technically 22 creatures in the deck, but Rakdos Keyrune does allow you to ramp from 3 to 5 total, but the thing is with it is the fact that the creature body of it has the first strike, which is a no-brainer to everybody. We all know what it does. The best thing about it is the fact that it does boink Thragtusk both sides of it, basically. And that's what you kind of want against these decks, especially against the Messenger decks. You want to at least have something against them to be able to just boink their creatures. Now, be aware of the Tragic Slips in there. If you're playing against black, you don't really want to consistently keep turning this thing into a creature because it will die very quickly. Now we're going to move into the mana base. Now, before I go into the actual lands, I want to talk about the color dominance within the deck. Technically, there are 19 black spells, there are 6 blue spells, and there are 18 red spells. So our deck is predominantly black and red, with a very small splash of blue. Obviously, we can see that. 4 Snapcaster Mage, 2 Izzet Charms in the main. With that being said, we know that we have to have more black and red than anything. So what we did was we found all the black lands that we could that had, obviously, the duals, being Dragon Skull Summit, Drowned Catacomb, 4 Blood Crypts, and then we start talking about the numbers for the rest of the lands. Now, you'll look in here and you'll see that there is no mountain in this deck. There's no need for it. You don't want a mountain in the deck. There's 1 island and 2 swamps. That is all you can afford with it. You want to at least have 11 basic type lands in the deck. Now, the shock lands allow us to use the summits and Drowned Catacombs untapped more often than not, and that's the reason why we want at least 11 total type effects of those lands. We also have 2 Sulphur Falls in the deck, kind of balance out the red and blue, and then we're going to move into our Cavernous Souls. The reason why we have 3 Cavernous Souls in this deck is because we have 10 vampires total throughout the 75, and we also have 10 humans throughout the 75, which means Cavernous Souls naming human or vampire is always going to hit something. It's always going to make your things uncounterable. Now the dragon, there's only 3 dragons in the deck, but there are 3 caverns to complement it. But sometimes you're not going to have to use 1 cavern on like vampire or anything in the beginning. You're going to want to use it for the dragon. Now we're going to move into sideboard. We have 1 dissipate, we have 1 dreadbore, 3 negates, 1 more Olivia Voldaren, the 4th pillar of flame, 2 Rakdos charm, 1 Rakdos' return, 2 slaughter games, 1 tragic slip, and 2 zealous conscripts. What I'm going to do is basically talk about what goes into the deck and what comes out of the deck against a couple of the matchups. Now I will go through each card and explain what matchup they're for, but I will not go into every deck. So we're going to start with Dissipate. Dissipate's obviously good against the Reanimator deck. You're obviously bringing it in against Control. Usually, sometimes it depends on how many caverns they're running, but usually you want it for like Sphinx's Revelation and stuff. But normally it comes in against Control and the Reanimator strategies. The 3rd Dreadbore we already talked about. You want to have another out to Planeswalkers while also being a kill spell. It's just very versatile for you. But I wouldn't want to see it as a 3-of in the deck just because it is slower than Ultimate Price. And I'm willing to sacrifice the Planeswalker killing for instant speed. So Dreadbore and the sideboard seems legit. 3 negates. 3 negates usually come in against Control, usually come in against the Reanimator strategy, sometimes Blue-White Flash, depending on like Sphinx's Revelation and whatnot, how powerful it is against you. But other than that, mostly comes in against those strategies. The 2nd Olivia Voldaren comes in against the Reanimator, Reanimator it actually works pretty good, but the mid-range strategies mostly. The 4th Pillar of Flame, that's a no-brainer, comes in against zombies, other aggro decks. It's just a good removal spell. Rakdos' Return comes in against Control usually. You don't want it against Reanimator. It's not a good idea. It's not really bad against mid-range, but I don't suggest it. Rakdos' Charm. The Charm comes in against Reanimator. There is some argument that you could use it against the zombie lists, but I don't think I really want to be doing that for the simple fact of how much removal you have in the deck and the 4th Pillar plus Snapcaster Mage combo you have against them. I wouldn't really want to bring that in. 2 Slaughter Games. Comes in against Control. It's good against Reanimator. Another one that you might consider bringing it in against is the mid-range decks, just to hit Thragtusks or something. But I wouldn't put both copies in there. I'd make it maybe a 1-of at the most. The 2nd Tragic Slip, we already talked about it. You want it against Falkenrath Aristocrat. It's not bad against the zombies. It does kill Knight of Infamy, but so does everything else in your deck. And then the last card in the sideboard is 2 Zealous Conscripts. You bring this in against the mid-range for sure. He's not bad against the Reanimator decks. Like, you wait until they play their thing, and then you steal it. And then you continuously beat them with it. Other than that, I'm going to go ahead and talk about some of the decks that you would actually board in certain cards and board out certain cards in the sideboarding. And then we'll go ahead and conclude the show. So for Black-Red Zombies, what you would bring in would be 1 Tragic Slip, 1 Pillar of Flame, and 1 Zealous Conscript. What you would take out is both Izzet Charms and 1 Rakdos Key Rune. Against the Naya mid-range decks, you're going to want to bring in 2 Zealous Conscripts, the 2nd Olivia, and 1 Dreadbore. What you would take out would be Sever the Bloodline, 2 Izzet Charms, and the Tragic Slip. Alright guys, well that is the Grixis mid-range deck here from MTG Epic Cinemas. I do want to thank you for watching. If you have any comments, suggestions, or questions about the main board or sideboard of this deck, please feel free to state them in the comment section below. Well, there is my Grixis mid-range deck for you. If you enjoyed the deck or the video, then subscribe and like us for future decks and or add us on Facebook and Twitter for updates on new videos and shows. Links are in the description below. Well, I'm your host, CoryV from MTG Epic Cinemas. Good gaming.